Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Humanities student panel at the University of Rochester, although in remote locations, in a sense. My name is Evelyn Regan. I'm a senior admissions counselor at Rochester. I also serve as the Humanities liaison, and I'm also a U of R alum. Today we have 3 students at the moment, and soon to be 4 students. Oh, speak of the devil. Um, 4 students joining us today to provide us with their perspectives about studying the humanities at Rochester, and I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll go off with Samantha first, Zafia, Griffin, and then Amanda.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm a senior history and English major here. Um, I'm from Westchester, New York, and when I am not studying, I run the campus television station. I'm part of Women's Club Soccer, and I do humanities research within the Meliora Scholars Program and with the HRIC program.
Hi, my name is Zafia. I am a senior from St. Paul, Minnesota. I am a French major, and I'm now completing minors in brain and cognitive sciences and an interdisciplinary minor in music and linguistics. And I've been involved with Acapella, Creative Arts Club, and the radio station.
Hi, I'm Griffin. I'm a sophomore at the University of Rochester from New York City. I am majoring in digital media studies with minors in psychology and journalism. And outside of the classroom, I'm involved in Greek life on campus, as well as a photography club, the alpine ski team, and the outing club.
Hi, my name is Amanda. I'm currently a senior majoring in interdepartmental humanities. More specifically, it's argument and advocacy. So it's a major I created myself. I'm minoring in legal studies and mathematics. And outside of the classroom, I play on the rugby team. And I'm currently doing research in anthropology.
Thank you all for providing those lovely introductions. We'll kick off the questions now. We've got some really good ones lined up for you. Um, First, we'll start off with some questions about the curriculum. How has our open curriculum benefited you personally, and what have your experiences been in humanities courses? And we'll keep the same order that we just went through.
So I think the open curriculum I quite love it. I haven't taken math since high school, which is some people's dream and other people's nightmare, but for me, it's been a dream. And I was able to double major quite easily. I'm actually finishing both my majors. I could have finished them both this semester, but I decided to split it up, and that's given me so much room to just explore, do research, have time for myself, not overwhelm myself. I will say I've also taken classes in bio, though I'm much more of a humanities person, and I found that I really love those as well. So I was able to do science centered things as well, but I do love the focus in the humanities.
I have had a really great experience with the open curriculum. It is one of the things that ultimately helped me decide to come to school here because I like when things are a little bit free form. I don't always like being told exactly like what I have to do. And it's been a really good experience to say satisfy a social science requirement with linguistics, which I turned out to really, really love. And it's related to the other things I'm studying when I would typically have a harder time in things like history classes in high school. For whatever reason, it's a weird thing for like a weak subject to be history. I feel like people don't usually say that, but that was an experience I came into college with. And I thought, okay, for my social science requirements, then I'm going to do something different. And I really, really love linguistics. And it also allowed me to change my mind a few times throughout my degree and still end up kind of accomplishing quite a bit because I changed my major a couple times and have a lot of credit towards things that I'm not necessarily graduating with. And I'm still able to make the decision to have the French major plus the double minor now. And so it's been helpful in that sense. I really am getting the chance to do a lot of things and also do them in depth, not just to sort of like skim the surface of a lot of stuff, but to like really get into it.
All right, so speaking from the perspective of a sophomore who has yet to declare their major, I think that the open curriculum is definitely kind of like a godsend in a lot of ways because I came into school with like a lot of academic interest and I wasn't 100% sure exactly what I wanted to study. So it definitely gave me a lot of chances to kind of explore, go down a lot of paths, a lot of avenues, and kind of like take stock of what was out there and it could help me like decide what I want to do further down the line. And also the fact that there are no gen ed requirements other than a freshman writing course is also amazing because you don't have to be forced to take classes that you're not interested in, and then you might not do as well in those. And I think it's personally like from like an educationally philosophical perspective, I feel like it's a lot better to choose all of your classes and take what you're truly interested in rather than being kind of forced down a particular path and not really being able to explore your own interests or possibly discover new ones. So I think the open curriculum has really benefited me in a lot of ways regarding that.
Yeah, I think all of that's like really great. I guess in terms of me, I think whenever I am describing the curriculum to somebody, I sort of say that like University of Rochester gives you the opportunity to curate your own education, and I think that's the biggest thing of like everyone's kind of interested in a whole bunch of different things, and uniquely you get to design your own path at the U of R, which I think also adds to like our collaborative environment where everyone's interested in really specific things that they like find to be cool or interesting. Like I started off in engineering actually. I was in engineering for like a year and then I was a math major for 2 years. And then I was like, you know what, we're gonna full send it. And I proposed and declared a major in humanities and was like, okay, my math thing is going to be a minor now because I can just abandon the major and it's fine and I'm still going to graduate on time. But I think this gives students just generally an opportunity to sort of be like, what are the questions that really inspire me? What do I actually want to learn about? Maybe you like take like ECE 111, you're like, yeah, circuits are cool. And then you take 113, you're like, circuits are also cool. And then you take like, I don't know, like logic design, and you're like, this is not for me. UR gives you the opportunity to be like, you know what, like that's okay. Time to do something else. And I think that's something that universities don't necessarily have. So it's quite unique to UFR.
I can definitely relate to Amanda's points as I also started off on a different path when I was an undergraduate student here. And instead of studying the natural sciences as I intended, I actually ended up studying gender studies and psychology for my two majors and still graduated on time. So let's delve a bit more into what your specific experiences have been like within the humanities courses. What are the feel of these courses? And how has it impacted your way of learning?
I think a big thing you get with humanities classes here is that they're quite small and close knit. So I recognize a lot of people in my major, and I have friends with a lot of people in my major. So every time I go to a new class, I recognize someone. There's always someone to sit next to, someone to send me notes. Everyone's very friendly in general. It's also because of the small class, discussions flow very easily, and you become quite close to your professor. So you can email your professor and be like, I'm confused on the homework, or maybe we can meet up in office hours. And it doesn't feel quite awkward when you're in a large lecture hall and you're like, can I talk to them? Is it going to be weird if I go to office hours? So those are always quite nice.
There was some loud music playing nearby. I'm glad it stopped. I also definitely second the thing about the classes being small. I feel like that's probably one of the first things that people say about the humanities classes here. As a university that's already sort of just mid-sized, not super large as it is, with such a wide variety of humanities programs, you're inevitably going to end up in some small classes. And oftentimes as a first year student, that's really nice because I had a lot of floor mates taking chemistry 131 in one of the largest classes that the university has that's like a couple hundred students, I think. But my experience, like from the get-go, was taking, French classes with 8 or 10 students in them my very first semester, which was awesome. I got to know my professor really well. I got to know my classmates well, and I got to know some older students too. This was a class that had, I think, students in all 4 years in it, in just those 8 people. So it allowed me to connect with older students in my major who may have already gone through some of the stuff I was about to go through. And then also, one thing I sort of think about with the humanities classes here is that the programs are almost over resourced for the number of students that take part in them. And so there are always going to be resources that your teachers can link you to. And it's really, really easy to access those things and those events when you're in such a small and tight knit group of people.
All right, so my experience in humanities so far has been really beneficial because, like it's been said, like almost all the humanities classes are like really super small and kind of like tight knit. They're also like really discussion based, which I really like because I definitely love to like talk through what I'm thinking about in terms of those kinds of classes that we've been taking. So it's definitely helped me become, I guess, more discussion oriented because that was a thing that I didn't really have a lot of in high school. And really kind of delving into that type of academic setting has been really beneficial for me.
Yeah, I guess like I don't want to like say what everyone else said. So I guess something a little bit different is that I think the huge amount of diversity on the U of R campus translates really well into humanities courses. So we have like 10 times, or I don't know about 10 times, but you know, we have a huge proportion of international students. We have a huge proportion of people from like all sorts of different backgrounds, sorts of walks of life. I took a history class last year that was called International Human Rights. It was with Professor Jean Peterson. Wow, it was like great. It was great because we were talking about global context, but also just like being in that class with like 6 international students. I'm also an international student from like all sorts of different countries and all sorts of different backgrounds and like different understandings about human rights was so incredibly like eye-opening. Like I think when you take courses in humanities that encourage students to like talk about their own personal experiences, the U of R sort of like diversity and like population makeup really, really contributes to that. So I've been in a lot of humanities classes. I'm like, wow, I have never been to Haiti before in my life, but now there's like a student from Haiti talking about the justice system and how like post-earthquake things were implemented in the context of international human rights and like all of these like things that we're talking about in class. And that's like super, super real that I don't think you'll be able to get a lot of other places.
Thanks everyone for sharing. We're going to shift gears a bit and start talking a bit more about research. So what research opportunities have you engaged with and what benefits have you kind of received from partaking in these opportunities?
So when I first was coming here, I knew we were a research university, but I did not want to do research at all. It's the last thing I wanted to do. I thought it was all science-based. I did not want to go with a microscope, and it just wasn't for me. However, I was awarded a RIG grant, which is a research innovation grant from the school to do research. And I was like, oh goodness, now I guess I have to. So I started to do more research into doing research, I suppose. And I discovered that there's so many research opportunities available in the humanities that you can do. So then in my freshman year, I applied for the Melior Scholars Program, which is a research program here at the university that's humanities tailored. I got accepted, and then I have a research advisor. And for the last, a senior now, so 3 years, I've been studying alternative burials in the United States and looking at Asia, South Korea, and Japan. And the school I am going to be going to hopefully this summer. I was supposed to go last summer, but you know, things happen. Hopefully this summer, I'll be going to South Korea and Japan to complete my research and finally write my paper. And it's brought me so much closer to my research advisor, who's also my professor, who's also, I'd like to call him a friend. I'm nervous what he'll say, but say he's my friend that I could go to and a confidant. I could talk about things. And I also have my research group, which I'm quite close to. So it brought me more into the university, showed me things that I never knew I'd be able to do and things like that. And I'll get to travel, hopefully.
So I also entered the university kind of not knowing a lot about research, definitely wanting to be a total like hard humanities student, nothing else, thinking what research is there to do in that area. And while I still, 3 years later recognize myself as not a super research oriented person, I love hearing about things everybody's doing. One of my closer classmates that I met through French classes ended up getting a summer job translating like medieval French text for a graduate student's project and got to take part in that research. Like I did not realize there was French research happening here, and it was cool to hear about it. And I also, and even at a school where a lot of people are focused on research, I don't feel out of place as a student who decided that doing that specific thing isn't necessarily for me or for like what I want out of my career. I have a lot of other things I focus on, and it would probably overwhelm me to focus on research projects, but it doesn't leave me feeling out of place as a student here. I just love hearing about what everybody else is doing.
So in terms of research, I haven't gotten involved in research yet as much as I'd like to. I was like looking into it last year, but then obviously all this stuff happened before I could like kind of hit the ground running. So that was kind of put on hold. But when I came into school, I didn't think that humanities would get a whole lot of research opportunities anyway, just because like when I think of research, for the most part, I just think of like natural sciences and like social sciences and stuff like that. But then upon learning more about it, I realized, oh, there's a lot of research happening in this area too. So I definitely am hoping to kind of get involved in research, like involving like digital media studies or maybe art history, stuff like that. So there's definitely kind of like no shortage of opportunities to get involved in research in the humanities. And just because research can be construed as a science dominated area, definitely don't count humanities out on that, because like especially here there's just a lot of opportunities to get involved with that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. Um, I think that so you are one research institution, which means that every single member of faculty conduct research, and obviously we have humanities faculty, therefore we have humanities faculty conducting research. I think about like the origins of like human knowledge and stuff, and a lot of that is inherently humanistic. Like why do we teach what we teach? Why do we know what we know? And all of that sort of like falls into what research in humanities sort of looks like. You're thinking about big questions. I think in terms of like the nitty gritty of research at the university, so like I've done a lot of research in a lot of places, and I feel like I spent my junior year, I took 12 credits of independent study where I was doing just research for course credit. So yeah, like if you're interested in like biology or medicine, you could do like research in biology or medicine, presumably at a lab, or if you're in psych, presumably also at a lab potentially. But in humanities, we have like a huge variety of experiences. You could be a part of a research group that has like social political aims, and what I mean by that, it's like they're trying to identify a problem that's so the group that I'm currently involved with is the Rochester Decarceration Initiative. I'm pretty sure it's called something else. Maybe it'll come back to me. Basically, I'm doing field work in anthropology where I'm out on the streets almost every day at protests being like, hey, can I talk to you? And all of that's super cool. My specific research focus in that area I got involved with because I took a class where the professors were like, oh yeah, this is the project of the class. We're going to do ethnography. It was Anthropology 223, Cultural Politics of Prison Towns. And that's super current stuff. So I ended up continuing that research, and now I'm sort of looking at how does the concept of the prison change culture in a specific location, and the location that I chose was the hospital. So that's sort of what I'm doing right now. My junior year I did independent study in rhetoric, so like with an English department faculty member, and we surveyed a bunch of people. Sometimes you have like quantitative methodologies, but we surveyed a bunch of people, read a lot of theory, and then we were like, okay, cool, we're going to write a paper. Here's my thesis. Here's what I think. Do you think this is publishable? And he was like, you know what, like, let's see if it gets published. So they like yeeted it off to the to the Journal of Communication, and we'll find out, I guess. So that's sort of my experience with research. My freshman year, I also like tried to do. I came to of our being like, I'm gonna do research. That's like all I want to do. That's like still sort of true. Or like, yeah, except instead of washing test tubes in a lab, I'm like creating theory that might be really important in the grand scheme of like publications. But who knows?
Thanks all. We're going to switch topics once again. So, what are your current plans and goals after graduation for those of us who are getting closer to it? And Griffin, if you want to talk about future summer plans or plans at Rochester, that's cool too. And how has studying the humanities at Rochester better prepared you for whatever your future plans may be?
I'll say that's probably the number one question I get is from everyone that hears I'm a humanities major. They're like, oh, you're going to be a teacher? I'm like, no, I don't want to be a teacher. Nothing wrong with being a teacher, just not for me. I'm currently planning to go to law school. So I am in the midst of applications, LSATs, all that craziness, applying to colleges again, which isn't quite fun, but I'm planning on going to law school. And I've currently done a lot of district attorney work. I worked for a defense attorney one summer. So it's really easy actually to get internships within the social sciences field, the humanity fields from a research university where you do this work because they're so interested in what you guys do, the small class work, and you're able to get really good references. So
Yeah, I am in immediate sense, I am hoping, I'm mostly planning to be able to go spend a year in France teaching English this coming year after I graduate, which I'm really looking forward to because I hadn't had the chance to spend a lot of extended time abroad. And I'm looking forward to hopefully getting to use more language. But I have a lot of ideas. I have a feeling I'll probably end up going into education. I probably do want to become a teacher. Um, very sort of classic humanities major, but quite possibly not of French. I also really like working one-on-one, and because I kind of ended up falling into this sort of, my major is French, and then I'm doing minors in music and linguistics and brain and cognitive sciences with this kind of focus on language and sound cognition. I am starting to become really interested in working as a like speech and language pathologist. Um, Hopefully with children. I think that that would be a really kind of just enjoyable, interesting use of putting together either that or music therapy, because I've studied a whole lot of music. Um, and as somebody that kind of went in thinking, oh, I want to do something, you know, really artistic, really humanistic, I don't think I'm ever going to focus a lot on the science stuff. I surprised myself over the course of the last few months, and I'm starting to think, wow, this is a really great way to integrate a lot of the things that I'm, you know, strong in. And even if the cognitive science isn't like my favorite thing in the world, it's providing me a really strong foundation to kind of do like one-on-one language work, which is something I really enjoy. I really enjoy being with people.
All right. So speaking as a sophomore, I have not even begun to start like concretely thinking about plans following graduation. But as my time here at Rochester goes on, I definitely hope to study abroad once travel restrictions become a thing of the past. Um, I I definitely want to do that. In terms of possible plans post graduation, I'd probably want to go to some kind of grad school, maybe a school of social work or something like that, because what I want to do with my combination of major and minors, which are DMS and psychology, I want to look into possibly creating like an online platform that provides mental health resources to underserved communities. And whatever the avenues are for kind of realizing that concept, those are definitely going to be like the kinds of paths that I want to take regarding that.
Yeah, I guess like a big emphasis on like the when I started out, I had no idea what I was gonna do with whatever degree I was gonna get. I didn't even know what I was gonna major in until like literally like last year. Yeah, but like my current plans are I'm going to take a gap year or 2 gap years before applying to PhD programs. What I'm looking to do is get a PhD in cultural studies or something along the lines of like visual media studies, something like that. Because I want to do research in how video games affect the cultural landscape of like humanity right now. And I think that's super cool and super interesting. I think even when I was in STEM, I was sort of just like, yeah, I think it'd be cool to make games. And then sort of coming at it from a cultural perspective has been sort of wild. So I found like a really, really, really specific interest that can be a PhD. And then in my gap year, I like get a job, pay rent. The plan so far is to go into like political communication if I take those 2 gap years, because that makes decent money, but also I think a lot of the skills that I built taking humanities courses, learning how to communicate and write effectively are super transferable to, you know, kinds of like corporate jobs. I think there's like this bit where they're like, oh yeah, you're never gonna get a job because you're a humanities major. Totally not true, for a couple of reasons. First is that at the end of the day, regardless of whatever job you get in whatever field, you're gonna need to write and you're gonna need to communicate. Second, like you develop a ton of applicable skills and applicable hard skills that most, I guess, other fields like such a heavy emphasis on. Like at the end of the day, if you're working for any kind of company or any kind of structure or even a nonprofit or the government, you're going to need to like write good emails. You're going to need to be able to communicate about like XYZ projects. And that articulation is super, super important regardless of the field. So it's like, I sort of think about like my humanities background as like kind of like a golden ticket into whatever I want, because you can just like sort of be like, yeah, I took like all of these courses and they make me a really good communicator. You know what you need? Really good communicators, and then like maybe they'll have they will hire you. I don't know.
Yeah, Amanda, you hit the head of the nail on that one. Additionally, just adding on to some of your thoughts, I would say our students who study the humanities learn to look at the world in different critical ways using different critical lenses. And that critical thought is um, extremely valuable to any future career or education that you plan on going into. But we'll move on to some more general questions. How do you fit into the Greater Rochester community as a humanities student? How are you able to find your place?
I think it's, well, I guess on my tour I always get the question, are the majors like cliques kind of? Do the bio majors only hang out with the bio majors, engineering majors only hang out with the engineering majors? And totally not the case. My roommate's actually a BME. I'm the humanities. We're still friends. Still get along. Um, However, I think fitting into the community, you always need humanities students. The art students, they put up beautiful art, have discussions. I take classes in the natural sciences. Natural sciences take classes in the humanities. One big, I don't know, feel very cliche, being like it's one big happy family, but it does all meld very well together, and you get a full rounded education. If we didn't have the humanities, you couldn't read. No, I'm kidding. It wouldn't be a full round education.
One thing that I didn't sort of think or realize until I had been at school here for a while is that a lot of universities have a big number of, you know, classes for non-majors. So they might have science requirement fulfilling science classes for non-science majors, or, you know, writing classes specifically for people in engineering. And with the exception of just a few courses, the University of Rochester does not really have courses for non-majors. There are a couple exceptions, but more broadly, it's just not really part of most people's degree programs. And so when you are taking, you know, I'm taking a cognitive science classes right now, and there are a lot of sciences majors in those classes. If you're taking bio classes, you're taking the bio classes with the bio majors, even if you're just satisfying a small requirement. And likewise, if you are taking a humanities class, you're taking it with non-majors too. So I've had plenty of people just taking electives in my French classes. My French classes are probably 1/3 humanities majors, which means that, and then the professors still expect you to be just as engaged, which means that everyone gets really into it. You don't have people that are just kind of there hanging out, floating. If they're there in the class, then everyone is getting really engaged with the material. So you are developing a community around the humanities subjects with people that may not have that as their primary area of interest. But I think it reinforces the fact that the students here are very into pretty much whatever it is they're doing. Even if it's not their major, even if it's just an elective, like there's a lot of passion that happens. And then also as far as connecting as a community with students outside of your major, and me initially kind of having been afraid to set foot on this campus that I had never visited before as someone who was really arts and humanities focused. So many students here have that focus and those interests outside of class too. So I got involved with like music groups, a cappella, things like that, where you come across a lot of people with different majors from what you're studying, but oftentimes have things like really, really dear to you in common. And that's really, really rewarding. So I was nervous about feeling out of place here in a major that's not super popular, but it really never felt like a problem.
So I feel like how I fit into the Rochester community as a humanities student is a very kind of unique and interesting position, especially because my major, digital media studies, is one of the newer majors at the university. There are very few people that are in the major when you compare it to like other similar majors. And when I tell people that, literally no one knows what it is. I have to explain it to literally everybody I know. So it definitely at first kind of put me out of it, but then I realized that as a humanities major, we kind of offer an interesting perspective to university life that a lot of people don't really know, especially because for the most part, more at least from my experience, most of the people that I know and am friends with are natural sciences majors. And I feel like looking at things from a humanities perspective definitely adds kind of an interesting element to campus life in a lot of ways. So for me, I feel like being a humanities student really just kind of it's really just kind of like a perspective enhancer for the most part.
Yeah, I think that like at the end of the day, like we're all just like people. And I think the humanities sort of fits into that quite well. I find that like most of the conversations I have with my friends aren't really about coursework necessarily, but they're about I guess like social issues. And like everyone, regardless of what background they're in, cares about something. And I think that's sort of the way we connect. I feel like that's like sort of the way that the whole student body sort of connects. Like we rally around beliefs and ideas and get together. Hey, what community engagement? Interesting question. What do we consider community? Um, is it students and faculty and staff at the university? Is it like the whole of the? And I think I've had a lot of it's like opportunities to sort of have that question asked to me over and over again. So then when I sort of ask the question of like, oh, how do I fit into the Rochester community? It's like as a citizen, as a member, as a person with responsibilities to make this community better as well. And I think a lot of things that I learned in humanities is like things like concepts of justice, things like history of segregation and redlining, for example, easily applies into some of the issues, some of the like super pressing issues that we deal with on campus.
Thanks, all. Um, what makes studying the humanities at Rochester unique?
I guess something that's unique at Rochester. I guess there's two things I'll hit on. I feel like studying humanities in general is just a fun experience. Makes it unique. I would say because this is, people tend to think of it as a STEM heavy school, you get so much attention from the professors and from the school, and the resources, as Sophia was saying earlier, are so much more available. I'm not saying because there's less competition, but a little bit. It's much easier to get funding for um, research for humanities research than I would say at another school would be. And there's so much funding available because the school doesn't treat us any different. We're not like off to the side. We're very much involved in the campus community and in the campus culture. So that's quite exciting. And then I would say Rochester as a city in total and as a whole has such a cool history and such a cool humanities culture. There's a Memorial Art Gallery. We had Frederick Douglass, Susan B. Anthony. So there's just so much you could learn from the city as well.
Yeah, I want to second the thing about all of the resources. Like I said earlier, like there's a lot of funding, a lot of internship availability in the city and connections for elsewhere, research with professors. I could really go down the list. There are all kinds of like talks and events that happen in the library. Most of these are hosted or sponsored by like the library in conjunction with the humanities departments, and those are always free. I like to just be able to like wander into those, hear really awesome lectures. And then the other thing beyond just the resources is how interdisciplinary the humanities study is here specifically, not just interdisciplinary in the sense that you sort of have the open curriculum and you're doing natural sciences and social sciences, but even within the humanities itself. In my French major, I've taken classes in, 17th and 18th century French philosophy. I've taken a course on aesthetics. I've taken like a gender studies course that was cross-listed with French because of the literature requirement. And I've also had where was I going with this? There was something else, one other thing I was going to mention. Oh, and in a comparative literature course that I had to do as part of the major seminar, we were reading all kinds of theory. So I was getting to read, feminist theory, critical race theory, all as requirements for my French major. In addition to studying some like really particular elements of French culture, getting to watch films throughout that major. And that's one reason I really love language study, and in particular, my experience of foreign language study here is that you don't have to focus, you don't have to laser focus on one thing. You get this really kind of broad interdisciplinary perspective that is sort of like Amanda said, it's like the golden ticket almost.
All right, so what I feel like makes studying the humanities here unique is the way that it kind of meshes with other majors and other kind of areas of study. Because really, you can look at anything from like a humanities perspective. You can look at something like a really, really kind of in-depth lab-based like science course, for example. You can definitely look at that from a humanities perspective. And I feel like here also, like the fact that a lot of humanities courses are like cross-listed with other disciplines is really interesting and really beneficial. Like last fall, I took a course that was language of advertising, and it was primarily a linguistics course, which is for the most part social sciences, but it's also cross-listed with film and media studies, which is more humanities. So I thought it was really interesting the fact that so many of the courses here are so kind of like interdisciplinary and kind of like interwoven with other areas of study that really, no matter what you're studying, no matter what like the course is kind of billed as, it can really kind of take the appearance of something else entirely. And it can really just be like, oh, I'm taking a course in linguistics, but I'm actually learning about like how film and media are used to convey certain thoughts. So it's kind of like you think you're signing up for one thing, but then you're also getting that, but you're also kind of being thrown into a whole other experience, which I think is really cool. And in a way, it kind of forces you to like look at things from another perspective and consider other areas of study that you didn't think you were really into, which I definitely think can be very beneficial, especially in determining what you want to study and as you go throughout college.
I think it's university as a whole, regardless of like division of work, division the collaborative nature of coursework here. So I went to like a really competitive high school, and like no one shared notes and no one talked to each other about like coursework. Everyone was just like, oh, what grade did you get? Time. But then coming to U of R, I think the big shift for me was that like people actually want you to succeed also, which is cool, especially in humanities courses. So I guess like the biggest example for me was like writing 105 was wild to me because all the other students were giving feedback on like a piece of work, trying to make my work better, and then vice versa. And that was like relatively new to me, coming from like a background of like, your AP US history, DBQs or whatever, everyone's like doing it by themselves. I think that shift for me was really cool. Start getting into, or at least when I start taking like upper level seminars, like my history class was a 300 class, everyone's already super on board with the whole like my idea makes your idea better, and we all like learn from each other. And I think that's super great, super unique, and is like super salient in the humanities, especially since it's everyone's like, subjective experiences coming together to form a whole picture of like how the world works, or how these concepts like sort of interact in their everyday lives. So definitely has been like, that's the thing for me at least.
I couldn't agree more with what y'all are saying. It's amazing how much you can learn from your classmates who are coming from the different walks of life. And I think that's one of the benefits of having these largely discussion-based humanities courses, so you can learn from each other. We're on our final question, and We'll wrap up after that. But what is your favorite thing about studying the humanities at Rochester?
Say my favorite thing, there's a lot of things I quite like, but I'd say my favorite thing is probably going to class and having the discussions. I feel like I've just learned so much that it's just so invaluable to me, setting me up for the future. I feel like me from freshman year when I was straight out of high school versus me now is just so much better educated, so much more better informed and better thinker almost. I just know so much more. So I would say just what I've learned has been my favorite thing.
I would say, and this is what I sort of say, that's one of my favorite things about studying here in general, is just how genuinely like passionate and into things the student body is here. You're getting people to bounce your ideas off of, like Amanda was talking about, and they're going to bounce ideas off of you, and everyone is just really engaged with what's going on. You don't have people, I feel like, faking it. You have people that really like want to be here and want to do what they're doing. And then also, yeah, just sort of how well it prepares you for, I feel, 3 years, and let's see, what, 6.5 semesters. And now I'm feeling like I've learned a lot, and my like critical thinking and the ways that I approach the world now is so, so different from how I felt when I came here as a freshman. And I'm really thankful for that.
So for me, my favorite thing about studying the humanities here is definitely just the multiple kind of applications that it can take on, especially like depending on like it doesn't really matter what exactly you're majoring in within the humanities. You can really take the same approach that you learn in each one to really anything. And I also really like how it's definitely introduced me to like new ways of thinking in general, new ways of like kind of engaging in discussion, new ways of laying out my thoughts and articulating them. And I also like how humanities, I feel like it doesn't like put you down kind of like a set path. I think it can definitely like prepare you for a wide range of like plans like after graduation, especially if you don't want to be kind of forced down to the path that like some natural sciences could take you on. I definitely feel like here you're just introduced to so many perspectives and so many like points of view and stuff like that that are really will serve you really well both in college and also way further down the line.
Am I audible? I just want to make sure Zoom. Yes, no.
Somewhat. A little bit better than before with the video.
Okay, cool. So I was second what Sophia said about how like you have to completely change. I entered how I about political ID and like how I wanted to interact with the world, and then at the end of it, I'm like definitely a different.
So at the moment, unfortunately, Amanda's internet is a bit spotty at the moment, so we can finish up with some final thoughts from our panelists and any advice that they have for our prospective students who are currently engaging in the college search and application process.
I guess final thoughts and advice is just do what you love. Do what you want to do. Explore, try different things. You might come in being like, I love neuroscience. It's what I want to do with my life. And you get here and you go, maybe not. Maybe it's not what I want to do with my life. And that's very scary, but you have room to experiment. You have room to try. And if you want to be an English major, you're like, oh, but everyone's like, what are you going to do with that? There's so many things. So don't worry. And the school's here to help you figure out what you want to do with that and what you can do with that. And there's just a million different opportunities. So.
Yeah, I kind of second that. Like, it's easy to hear like, oh, like you're gonna change your mind about what you want to major in, and be like, oh, well, I'm not gonna change my mind. Like, you're probably gonna change your mind. And maybe changing your mind just means adding something. Maybe you're gonna do what you originally thought, and then you're gonna add something totally different too. So don't necessarily focus on. Don't feel like it's the end of the world if you don't end up somewhere that has like the best program for the thing you want to study, for example, because your mind is going to change, your life is going to change. And the really great thing about humanities study is that it keeps a lot of doors open. It does not box you into one thing. So you're going to change your mind. I think life involves a lot of going with the flow, and that's part of why I like studying French.
Yeah, so my final thoughts, especially as someone who has relatively recently come out of this process, I think the best kind of way to look at it is go into it with an open mind. Like people have been saying, like you may think that you want to major in something in particular, and you might end up doing that, and that's great. But I feel like the best thing to do is don't only take courses within that major once you get here, because like you don't want to like close yourself off, and then you get so far down the path and then you realize this isn't for me, and then all of a sudden you're kind of like cramming to fill in other stuff. It's kind of, I feel like the best thing to do is just take a bunch of courses in things that you're not majoring in, or things that you've had even like slight interest in but you might want to learn more about. I feel like you will definitely surprise yourself, and I think that kind of perspective is definitely the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I guess I missed the question, but like I guess to finish the thought, which probably ties into the final question, which is like final thoughts and stuff. Yeah, like I changed a lot in the past 3 years, like substantially. I think that U of R is like this like cornucopia of like all these thoughts and ideas and people. Like you literally have access to like people who have won the Nobel Prize. You have access to people who are like specializing in a really, really specific indigenous culture. You have people whose like field work in anthropology, they like studied functioning anarchist societies. You have professors who like they are the lead person on whatever subject area it is. You have access to the largest collection of medieval texts in North America. Like this is such a wild place. It's like this magical sort of like, you know, opportunity where you can interact with more things that you could ever imagine. So I second what Griffin said regarding like just like keeping your eyes open, taking different things, and being open to sort of exposing yourself to ideas that you never considered, or even ideas that you never thought that you would find appealing at all. And then with that, it's like, yeah, like, you know, have fun, make friends, do something that you love. And I think like certainly in my journey of like being an engineer and then like being in math, I like sort of slowly over time allowed myself to do the things that I really love to do instead of the things that I thought I should be doing, vis-a-vis like whatever my parents told me was what I was supposed to be majoring in. Yeah, humanities.
Thank you everyone for your time and your thoughts. Our lovely panelists have shared their wonderful experiences at Rochester and the humanities. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for coming today. If you do have any future humanities questions, I'll drop my email in the chat, as well as if you're watching this later, I do have my name and email address along with a picture on the website, so you can find me there. And keep an eye out for other future humanities panels that are coming out. We've got a wide variety of topics to cover to really put on full display the massive amount of resources that humanities students have available to them at Rochester, and students who just study the humanities, generally speaking, even if you're not majors. But thanks again to everyone involved today for being here. I really appreciate it, and enjoy your weekend.